What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. It is officially the beginning of week 15. I like to say that every week in the NFL starts with this show, Carmen. You know how like Jim Nagy's got the draft starts in Mobile kind of a thing. Like every NFL week actually starts with this show. So if you're watching the show, if you're listening to the show, it's officially week 15 in the NFL. No bye weeks. We're done with that.
We're done with those.
No more water. No more breaks. Water's for cowards. Water makes you weak. Water's for getting blood off of my uniform. And you don't get blood
no
on my
blood
uniform.
on my uniform. You must be outside your mind.
Oh, always good to start the show with a Remember the Titans quote. Trevor Sikkema, Carmen Vitali here with you to do just that preview every single game that we have in the upcoming Week 15 slate in the NFL. Carmen, I see the hoodie is on. It's officially hoodie season in Christmas. How you doing? How's everything? Are you done with the Christmas shopping? Are you an early Christmas shopper? Or are you an extremely late Christmas shopper? I got to ask you.
Honestly, I'm a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because I have gifts for some people. I guess I did get like a lot of the gifts out of the way, but like the ones that are like hard for like the in-laws and stuff like that, I hope they're not watching. I don't have the gifts yet. I think we have an idea of what we're getting them, but those ones, the hard part is not done yet.
Of course they're watching. Everybody watches the show. You just expose yourself.
Honestly, they could be. They're very involved. It's really sweet. They're very, very involved in both mine and my fiance's content that we put out, which there's a lot. So,
well, you didn't say you weren't getting them gifts. You just said the gifts were.
Well, I haven't gotten them yet. Yeah,
they're coming. They're getting there. They're getting there. We're gonna get there.
But I finally got all of my like decorations and stuff up. So
I see the little tree behind you. It's wonderful.
Little tree. There was
I don't have one behind me. I need to get. I'm outside of my home setup. This is a road game for me. I'm in my parents' house, so we're on the road. It's a road game. The pressure is mounting, but there's no Christmas tree, so I guess I just need to bring the Christmas joy.
You were my inspiration because you've had a Christmas tree for the last couple of weeks. Then I'm like, I can't very well let Trev be the only one.
Well, now you're the one. Now you're carrying. Which is good. That's what, it's always a little bit of a give and take. That's what it is. So I appreciate you doing that, picking me up for the Christmas spirit here as I'm on the road here. We're going to do a lot of things here in this show. We're going to give you a matchup that matters for every single game in the Week 15 slate of the NFL, including Thursday Night Football and a Monday Night doubleheader. Haven't seen one of those in a while. We're also going to give you a plus factor. And speaking of plus factors, if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can follow along at home with all the PFF stats that we're going to be bringing you here on this show. See all the premium stats that we have to offer, the fantasy football tools, the unlocked mock draft simulator, all the free agency tools when we get into the offseason. It's so much good stuff. If you don't have one, go to PFF.com, get yourself a PFF Plus subscription, and get involved in the show as we're doing it here. We start, as we always do, with Thursday Night Football. Got a divisional matchup here. Thursday Night Football has been cooking this season. And we got the Rams versus the Niners. If this one was in LA, if this was a Rams home game, man, I feel really good about them. But it's on the road, so you never know what can happen. Carmen, as we always do, start with the matchup that matters. What do you got in this one?
Yeah, we've gotten, I feel like we're like in the upside down this season because these Thursday Night Football games have all been really good lately. And like for the last like half of the season that's gone by already, there's been some incredible games, and I think that this one will be another one because you get division opponents, and that's what happens. Things get weird. My matchup that matters for this, though, is whoever the Rams decided they're going to attack George Kittle with, because I can tell you how the Bears decided to do it last week, and it didn't go so well for them. So 6 of the 7 targets that George Kittle received and actually caught, because he caught all 7 of his targets last week, there was either a linebacker or a defensive lineman as the first guy in coverage on George Kittle. And it made no sense. It broke my brain. Even if those were the only 7 plays that George Kittle had a linebacker or a defensive lineman on, Brock Purdy knows George Kittle enough to recognize those mismatches instantaneously. But George Kittle cannot be treated like a normal tight end. He is a receiver. You must treat him like a receiver. He can block, he can be a part of that, but you have to teach him treat him like a receiver. And a safety is going to have a hard enough time trying to keep up with him, much less a linebacker or a defensive lineman. I swear to you, Zach Pickens had had a little thing in the stat line that said that he was in coverage on George Kittle according to Next Gen Stats last week. So don't do that. Don't do that, Rams. Just keep a guy on George Kittle that can keep up with him, because Brock Purdy is going to go to him quite a bit, especially with the injuries they have in the run game and how big of a factor George Kittle can be for them,
Well, in
especially.
theory, that's that's what you want out of an elite tight end. Too fast for a linebacker to cover, too big for a
Right,
safety
too
to
big for a
cover.
safety to cover. Exactly.
And so George Kittle is the manifestation of that. And he's the highest graded tight end that we have in the league for a reason. I think every single game, you're right, this could be a matchup that matters, but certainly don't do whatever Chicago did last week, because what do you have? Like 138 in the first half alone?
Yeah, well, he had 115 yards, but he had the touchdown. He caught all 7 of his targets, so that's just it's too much. Yeah.
On the Rams side of things, my matchup that matters is 49ers defensive line and just defense in general that's been struggling against the run, trying to contain Kyren Williams. Because when we talk about the Rams, I'll at least mention the wide receivers. I don't know if you're going to mention either of them as your plus factor, but Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I mean, they've been rolling, especially you look at last week and how this offense played against the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that passing attack was unbelievable. Those 2 wide receivers are 2 of the best in the NFL, if not the best wide receiver duo that we have in the NFL. And the Bills, who are one of the best teams in the league, found that out the hard way last week. And I think they get all the notoriety, but really it's the constant great play of Kyren Williams that gives this team such a high floor every single week to be able to be like, all right, well, we can take a little bit more of risks. We can get a little bit more aggressive in the passing game with these 2 great wide receivers, because we know that Kyren's got us on the early downs. And he's been fantastic. He's had over 1,000 yards already this season. Hasn't had less than 62 rushing yards in any game since September. And on the Niners side of things, 58.3 rushing grade for the Niners defense. That's 30th in the NFL. And so their run defense is just not as good as it needs to be. So I think that if they can contain Kyren Williams at all whatsoever, that would go to their advantage. But here's the other thing. If they can't, I have a hard time believing that they're going to slow down this Rams offense that scored 44 last week against the Bills. Who's your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, I am going to the wide receivers. And I have Puka in there, but it's only because he's the one that's actually leading the league in threat percentage, which I know is one of your favorite stats.
Crazy. Yeah.
37.6% threat percentage, but Kupp is 3rd. So you've got 2 of the top 3 guys in threat percentage on this roster. You got to utilize them. They have to be the plus factor here. Quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford has 101.6 passer rating when targeting Puka. And again, when he's targeting Cooper Kupp, 110.6 passer rating. So these are guys that are just extraordinarily productive. They're the backbone of the offense. And when you have a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, who can get the ball out so incredibly quickly, it's just a matter of how much, can these guys take what he's going to give them inevitably and run with it, quite literally. Yeah. But I do think that it's going to come down to how this Niners secondary really can contend with them. And they've had injuries all along the defense. You're maybe not going to get the push that you want up front if Nick Bosa is not back yet. It didn't seem to matter against the Chicago Bears last week, but I have to imagine it will matter for the Rams, who have a sneaky good offensive line too. And again, Matthew Stafford, who can get the ball out extraordinarily quickly.
I'm glad that you brought up the offensive line, because I mean, they could have been my plus factor in this one. My plus factor is I went with Matthew Stafford simply because if he's playing the way that he did last week, it's just going to be hard for any team to beat them. I mean, the Bills are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they weren't even able to keep pace with how well Matthew Stafford was playing with a guy like Josh Allen as their quarterback. 35 total dropbacks last week for Matthew Stafford. He was only pressured 9 times in that game. When he was able to be kept clean, which was the majority of the time, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 big time throws, 94.9 passing grade. I mean, he was just unbelievable last week, especially when he was kept clean. And the offensive line can go a long way into making sure that this passing attack remains potent. Obviously, there's a lot of injuries that's going on with the San Francisco 49ers. Any one of those guys could have been that plus factor. And even if they're out there, we know that they're going to be playing hurt. And so how those guys plays, a lot of those stars, the Trent Williams and Nick Bosa's, Fred Warner's been dealing with an injury all season long. Like, those guys certainly become plus factors. But again, if Matthew Stafford and the offensive line play the way that they did last week, I don't know if it's going to matter. It's in San Francisco, so that's why I give them a little bit of a bump there. But holy cow, I would not want to be playing this Rams team right now. Going to the 1 p.m. games on Sunday, the Dallas Cowboys going to Carolina to take on the Carolina Panthers, a team that looks much better lately. They were a 13.5-point dog to the Philadelphia Eagles last week, and not only kept it close, but had an opportunity to take the lead at the end of the game there as the fourth quarter was winding down. And unfortunately, we got well, I don't know if you're an Eagles fan, it wasn't unfortunate, but it was unfortunate to see Xavier Legette drop the football at being the reason why they weren't able to get into the end zone. But what's your thoughts overall in this game and your matchup that matters here?
Yeah, I'm looking more toward the fact that Micah Parsons is one of the only good things about this Dallas defense right now. He's pretty much one of the only good things about this Dallas team right now that's lacking a lot of things in motivation. But you look at what Micah Parsons does, and he does switch sides. So my matchup is the Carolina tackles versus Micah Parsons, and they're not afraid to have him. I think last week he was more operate on the left side of the formation. He has also gone on the right side, I think, for a slight majority this season. But the takeaway from this is that the Dallas Cowboys are not afraid to move him around that defensive front to get better matchups. So how is Ike Ekwonu going to do against him? How is right tackle Taylor Moton going to do against him? Carolina tackles, 77.6 grade overall. That ranks 11th in the league. So again, you talk about the things that have gotten so much better for this Panthers team. We've talked about it week in and week out, how this offensive line is much improved over last year. And you can see how much Bryce Young trusts them a little bit more after sitting back and watching them from the bench and all that other stuff. But these tackles are going to be tested by Micah Parsons because they're whatever on a down by down basis, they are going to try and get Micah the better matchups and hopefully, see him wreak havoc because again, like I said, this defense is hurting, although they are going to get some reinforcements. I'll get to that, but Micah Parsons, the Carolina tackles, let's see.
Those are my plus factors, those two guys. So I'll
cool.
sort of piggyback off of what you said. And I could have chosen to say Micah Parsons, but I feel like I've said Micah Parsons is a plus factor a couple of times over the last few weeks. So I wanted to focus more on the
pickings with the Cowboys team right now.
But and that's the thing is that like Micah's the game wrecker, right? Micah's the true definition of the plus factor because if he plays at the level we know he's capable of, he can take over a football game. This past week, yeah, he didn't get a sack, but he had 13 pressures. He had 10 hurries. He had a 30% pass rush win percentage in this last game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And so yeah, he's doing everything that he can out there to try to be a difference maker. And if you turn some of those pressures into sacks, maybe some sack force fumbles, those kinds of things, those are the plays that can really change a game in your favor. Now, my matchup that matters, even though I want to give Bryce Young his credit and he's playing much better and he's got a lot more big time throws over the last 3 weeks. I know he had 9 going into last week's game. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is here. After their game against the Eagles, but I know that it's still pretty high. So Bryce is playing at a really high level, but I have a feeling that this game is going to be a low scoring, slower football game because the Carolina Panthers, for as much as they want the ball in Bryce's hands, they still want to be a team that runs the football. And Chuba Hubbard was on an incredible pace in the middle parts of the season, and it's been a little up and down for him. Jonathan Brooks is in the lineup, and unfortunately he retore his ACL, which sucks. But I feel like this is going to be a game where Carolina is going to heavily lean on Chuba Hubbard. Not that they haven't already, but I think he's going to be a main part of their game plan. I think they're going to want to run the football. Dallas Cowboys, they're not as bad in run defense as they were in the first half of the season when we were really harping on them for it, but it's still not a great run defense team. I think Carolina knows that, and one of the safest, easiest things that you could do in this game on offense is hike the ball, hand it off to the running back. That's it, and just have them run forward. That's what Chuba Hubbard's been doing all season long. I think Carolina's going to do that, and then, of course, I think Dallas is going to do that as well. No Dak Prescott. No real explosive weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb. Rico Dowdle's got 329 rushing yards over the last 3 games. Mike McCarthy says a little bit of an obvious here. Rico Dowdle's the RB1. We already knew that, bud. And so I think that they are going to lean in him a ton for this game. So to me, I don't know what the over-under is off the top of my head, but I think this is going to be a low-scoring, slower, control the football type of a game for both teams, and whoever runs the football is just going to win this game. That's what I really believe. So I think that is the matchup that matters. Who's your plus factor here in this one to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. And then I do think that Trayvon Diggs came back this last game against Cincinnati, and so this will be his second game back being healthy. And you think that not only, again, what Trayvon Diggs can do for the secondary as far as pass coverage, but also how he factors into run defense, which goes back to your point of who's going to run the football better, because this Dallas Cowboys defense has not been good for most of the season. You've seen a little bit more fight out of them with Micah being healthy, and now you've got the reinforcements in the back level with Trayvon Diggs. But that's one thing where I do think Trayvon's going to have to be able to shut down. We talk about Xavier Legette being the one to drop that pass. Can you be the one to kind of lock those guys up and make it so that it doesn't come within that, it doesn't come that close, or then you get the same result as you did last week when something inevitably falters, goes wrong, whatever, with Bryce Young, with any of these Carolina receivers. I just think that Trayvon Diggs can make a huge difference for this Dallas defense that, again, like I said, has been not great for a lot of this year in both phases of the game.
And when that's the case, you need the dramatic plays, right? You need the turnovers. That's why I said, like, the Mike Parsons is not just the sack, it's the strip sacks that you kind of like need from him, or the interceptions from Trayvon Diggs, something like that. Dallas needs those to swing in their favor, especially going on the road against a Carolina team that looks a lot better now than they did at the beginning of the season. Chiefs traveling to Cleveland to take on Jameis Winston and the Cleveland Browns. Matchup that matters here, Carmen. What do we got?
Yeah, well, speaking of takeaways, the Chiefs defense ranks 28th in takeaways. They only have 10 on the season. And that just, there's so many deficiencies that I feel like of this Chiefs team that have been covered up just by the sheer fact they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Andy Reid, and they have this almost preordained something or other, cosmic something or other that's helping them win games where field goals that hit the upright are doinking in rather than out. The Chiefs, I said, I've said this whole season, I'm never going to bet against them, especially when the postseason comes around. But this Chiefs defense just hasn't lived up to the billing in so many different ways, where you're not getting the push up front outside of Chris Jones. There's like no one's really doing anything along that defensive line. You're not getting the takeaways that's giving your offense the extra chances. This should be a game where you have an opportunity to do that if we know anything about Jameis Winston, especially if you are able to garner some of that pressure that's been lacking up front and force Jameis into some errant situations, or to kind of flush him out of the pocket, let him play that backyard football that he likes to play, and then make some bad decisions when he's on the run or scrambling to throw the ball down the field. You can take advantage of that. And this is absolutely should be one of those games where Kansas City should be able to up that takeaway total, because 10 just isn't going to cut it this year.
So I'll go on the other side of things for my matchup that matters. Dalton Wasserman on our review show found a really great stat that I thought was fascinating. Okay. So when we think of the Kansas City Chiefs, we think of an explosive offense. We think of Andy Reid. We think of Patrick Mahomes. But often, we think of the Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in his prime days, where they're just bombing it deep down the field, and it's just all sorts of explosives and 5,000-yard passing seasons and all that. Dalton found this. They have the fourth fewest 15-yard plays in the NFL this season. But on the other side of things, they're tied for the fourth most first downs. So even though they don't have the explosive plays that they used to, they're still getting into third down situations, but it's like the comfortable third down situations that normally you don't want to put yourself in, but the Chiefs are totally cool with it because they have the answers. They know how to convert on third down just about as good, if not better, than every single team in the NFL. So they're not as explosive, but they're still converting so many first downs this season. So my matchup that matters is knowing, after Dalton pointed that out, knowing that the Kansas City Chiefs are in third down so much, maybe we don't think about it because the drives still go for so long. What is the Browns' third down defense? They're 19th right now in PFF overall defensive grade on third down, but they are 27th in EPA per play allowed. And of course, when you allow a conversion, whether it's a run or a pass on third down, that's going to negatively impact your EPA per play allowed, because it's obviously getting the team a lot closer to their goal, a lot closer towards scoring a touchdown or a field goal. And so the Browns being as poor as they are right now with their third down defense gets me worried against a team that is converted on third down so well that most of us just haven't even really noticed how many times they are getting in third down. It just feels like, man, it's just another down for this team. It's not a do or die situation. They handle things so calmly. They understand what they have to do next. And so how the Browns fare on third down is going to mean a lot in this one because there just have not been many teams that have made the Chiefs uncomfortable. It's almost like when their back gets against the wall, they ramp it up. They get more focused. They get more ready to convert on those third down opportunities. So I think that is a big one. Who's your plus factor here in this game?
I have a really niche kind of hipster plus factor.
I love it.
But
Let's hear it.
he's not niche or hipster to Bucs fans. Justin Watson. I discovered something about Justin Watson this season for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Justin Watson won in the Super Bowl with Tampa. He won the last Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is kind of a very, very invisible part of this offense. But he leads the league in one very specific stat among qualified receivers, I should say. Contested target catch percentage.
Wow.
He has 80% of his contested targets he catches for Patrick Mahomes. And I think we made a huge deal about the Chiefs getting DeAndre Hopkins and Patrick Mahomes finally having that guy that can go up and get contested catches. Little did we know, Trev, he already existed on the roster, and it was Justin Watson. And there are times, again, he doesn't have the volume, and again, this is a very niche kind of stat, but I just found this to be really funny and interesting. When it's crunch time, when you need one of those third downs and you have a prayer from Patrick Mahomes after he's scrambling around for 3, 4, 5 seconds in the backfield, every now and again, it's Justin Watson that comes up with those catches. And it's very interesting to see that he's fighting for that and that anytime you can throw him those contested targets because he's going to come down with them when you do. So I thought that was a really interesting, fun thing for Justin Watson, who never gets any play.
I like to tie in there, especially because a little bit of my motivation for my plus factor also goes back to some Bucs days.
Oh.
My plus factor here is David Njoku. And you don't have to go all the way back to Jameis Winston's Bucs days to appreciate how much he likes to throw the ball to tight ends, because over the last 2 weeks, David Njoku has received 7 targets. He's caught 7 receptions and 9 receptions, respectively. And that's a pretty high clip for a tight end emphasis in this offense. If you do go all the way back to Jameis Winston's days when he was starting with the Buccaneers, Cam Brate, O.J. Howard, I mean, they love to emphasize the tight end position. I remember, man, Cam Brate was just Jameis's go-to player. Yes. Of course, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, those guys were heavily involved as well, but there were so many times where they would emphasize Cam Brate, even at the beginning of drives, on first down, not just in the red zone or on third downs or anything like that. And I feel as though he's gravitating towards David Njoku the same way he did with that tight end emphasis when Todd Monken was when Todd Monken was the offensive coordinator down in Tampa Bay, and they really wanted to emphasize continuing to be a vertical passing attack with the tight end as a legitimate option. I think they have that in Cleveland. I think Jameis Winston sees that. And for as much as Jerry Jeudy gets a lot of the pub, I feel like this is a big David Njoku game. I think, something above, once again, above 6 receptions. I think he could be, anywhere from, yards is always sort of fickle, but like 70 to 100 yards. But more importantly, I think he's getting in the end zone this week. And I feel like we have seen that emphasis from him. And I think he's going to be a major X factor in this game because of how much Jameis has liked to throw the ball to the tight ends throughout his NFL career. And he's got a good one in Cleveland. The Miami Dolphins at the Houston Texans here. How do we feel about this one? Dolphins coming off a win. What's your matchup that matters here?
I'm going trenches here because I'm going the Dolphins D-line against the Houston O-line. Houston O-line, 66.6 overall offensive grade, which ranks 26th in the league right now, not doing CJ Stroud a whole lot of favors. They do have a 73.0 pass blocking grade, which ranks 15th. So they're marginally better in pass blocking rather than just overall grade. But then you look at a guy like Chalk Robinson and top 5 in pass rush win percentage. He leads the Dolphins in pressures. That is something where, you have the potential to be a game wrecker if you're Chop Robinson and prevent this Texans offense, which we've seen show flashes this season of quite a bit of productivity, especially now that you have Nico Collins and Tank Dell and the full availability of your receiving arsenal for, other than Stephon Diggs, for CJ Stroud. I just think you need to get to him, and you might be able to when it comes to this Houston O-line.
When it comes to my matchup that matters specifically, The Tyreek Hill versus Derek Stingley Jr. one is going to be a fun one because I think these are two of the most talented, skilled position players in the NFL that could be going up against each other. I think Derek Stingley has elevated himself into one hell of a football player and somebody who's been playing a little bit hot and cold lately, but man, you go back to, I'm just looking at his grades right now. Week 10 against the Lions, 88.4 coverage grade. The next week against the Cowboys, 83.1. Against the Titans, a little bit lower, is a 48.6, not great. But then against the Jaguars in week 13, before they had their bye week, 67.5. He's got a 69.6 overall coverage grade this season. He's got all the ability to be able to play against some of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And when you look at Tyreek Hill, he had over 100 yards receiving in last week's win over the Jets. That was the first time he had over 100 yards receiving since September. We've been on this show and we've been talking about plus factors, and I brought up a couple of times, Tyreek Hill's got to be that plus factor, and he really just has not been the way that we know Tyreek Hill can. It looked a lot closer to the Tyreek Hill we are used to seeing this past week against the Jets, and I'm wondering if we get that same player against a better Houston Texans secondary, all due respect to the Jets. I mean, they're banged up. Sauce Gardner wasn't in that game. They were playing some backups. It hasn't been good for the Jets secondary this season. Stingley Jr., though, specifically as somebody who has the ability to play shadow coverage, has the ability to move around the formation with Tyreek Hill. I don't know if that's super wise. You don't want to do that too often because I think Tyreek Hill is going to get better at basically any corner in the NFL. But how they fare, I think, is going to go a long way when it's strength on strength like that. Who's your plus factor?
That goes actually right into my plus factor, because my plus factor is basically just which team gets more out of their top wide receiver. Is it going to be Tyreek? Are you going to get the game that you got against the New York Jets and see him be more of that plus factor that we know he can be? Or are you going to see what Nico Collins can be to CJ Stroud, which means a lot? Nico Collins leads all wide receivers in overall receiving grade this year, 92.5. Sixth in yards per reception, with 18.1 average. He's second in threat percentage. He's sandwiched right between Puka and Cooper Kupp with 29.5% threat percentage. So this is the guy that, we saw what his absence meant to CJ Stroud and meant to this offense, and how they just weren't able to get a lot of stuff going. CJ Stroud not as comfortable whatsoever, not having the availability of both Nico and Tank. He's going to have that again. And are the Houston Texans going to get that, productivity out of their offense with Nico Collins in there? Or is it the Miami Dolphins that are going to get the productivity that we know that they're capable of with Tyreek Hill? I think whoever goes off more is the team that's going to win.
My plus factor here is Teron Armstead, the offensive tackle for the Miami Dolphins, simply because he only played in 5 snaps last week and Patrick Paul had to come in. Yeah. And from what I've read, obviously it's only Wednesday, Mike McDaniel said it's nothing like major. He's been dealing with a knee thing throughout the season.
He's always dealing with something.
Right, and he just needs rest. Okay, well, are you going to put him out there against, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson and put is a 70% Teron Armstead better than Patrick Paul? I don't know is the question.
Right.
And Lamb's been pretty good on the other side of things, and so you got some faith there that he could hold up the offensive tackle spot. But, whether it is a 60% Teron Armstead or a guy like Patrick Paul in a rookie going up against some really good pass rushers, I think that's going to be a plus factor here is whether or not Teron Armstead can play. And if he can, what percentage is he playing at? Because as much as you might have faith in Patrick Paul long-term, I mean, you don't want him out there in this game. You don't want him out there to face those two duos of edge rushers. They, I believe, still have the most sacks and most pressures of any defensive end duo in the NFL. So these guys have been able to get after it all season long. They're experienced, and it's a defensive line that is very comfortable and confident in how they attack the pocket. So Teron Armstead, to me, is the big plus factor, because if he's not out there, I'd be a little bit worried. Because Tua gets the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. Obviously, that's advantageous to this, but him playing clean, man, Tua is so good when he's playing clean. When this offense is on schedule, and so you want to do that as much as possible. Teron Armstead is going to go a long way into making that happen. The Jets and the Jaguars. Jets coming off a loss against the Miami Dolphins. Jags coming off a thrilling 10-6 road victory against the Tennessee Titans. There's obviously a little bit of sarcasm in there because it wasn't quite thrilling, but hey. Jags got a big win.
Win's a win.
And hey, you know what? Shout out to Mac Jones. Mac Jones grew up around the Jacksonville area. Now he's back home playing for the hometown team. when he gets traded to Jacksonville, probably a situation where he thinks to himself, all right, I'm behind Trevor Lawrence. I'm probably not going to play any time other than the preseason, but it's cool to be playing for the hometown team. We don't love the fact that Trevor Lawrence is hurt and he's not out there, but it is a cool opportunity for Mac Jones and a cool opportunity for him to go out there and get a win against a rival team. For as much as he's been a fan of the Jags, he's been a fan of them. And of course, the rival team has always in the NFC South been the Tennessee Titans, probably for as long as he was growing up and being a fan of that team. So it's cool. I just want to say that is cool. But
it is cool.
What's your matchup that matters here in this game?
I'm looking towards the Jets run defense because it ranks 24th in overall run defense grade at 59.8. And then you look at what the strength of this offense could be, especially when you are starting Mac Jones, and there's a question mark there. As cool as that factor is, he's not your usual starter. He's not Trevor Lawrence. So then are you going to lean then more on Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne? Tank Bigsby, he's 14th in rushing grade among running backs with a minimum of 100 carries. Second in missed tackles forced per attempt among the same group. So he can shake some defenders. You're going to have to be really sound when it comes to trying to tackle Tank Bigsby. And that's not something that we've seen out of the New York Jets defense. And I really do think that that's Jacksonville's best hope for some offensive production here, though it still could very much look like that last game against the Tennessee Titans, where it's a low scoring game and there's not a whole lot of offense happening. But if it's going to happen, it'll probably happen on the ground. You've got an opportunity to do that against a team that's been struggling in run defense this year.
I'll go to two units that are on a little bit of a hot streak here lately. Jets wide receivers versus the Jags secondary. Jets wide receivers, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, both of them over 100 yards receiving last week. Both of them had over a 74.0 receiving grade. I mean, it was a good game for both of those players, and it was a good game for the Jets passing offense overall. No Breece Hall in this game, and so they were going to have to pick up some of the slack, and I feel like they did. Unfortunately for the Jets, the two games in which they've scored the most points this season, both this game and their game against the Indianapolis Colts a few weeks ago, they lost both those games. So not ideal when the two highest scoring games that you have are losses for you. So that's not great. But again, they're kind of feeling it right now, and they're playing well, and they played well last week. They're going up against a Jags secondary that has struggled this season, not last week. 79.0 team coverage grade, which was their highest single game coverage grade of the season last week against the Tennessee Titans. Andre Sisco, Monteric Brown, Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby, all those guys had coverage grades above 74.0. As a team, they forced 7 incompletions. And so it was a great day at the office for the Jags secondary, and it's going to be a fantastic test going up against this Jets wide receiver room and just this Jets passing attack that was really feeling itself the week prior. So whose streak, whose momentum is real or not? I think that's going to go a long way into talking about who's going to win this game when we recap it at the beginning of next week. Who's your plus factor here for this one?
That is my plus factor, honestly. It's which team is more motivated to either win or lose, because both of these teams have been eliminated from playoff contention. They're both kind of heading for an organizational overhaul. Likely anyway. And in the case of the Jags, obviously that's already started in New York.
I think it's fair to say that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it too. So which team is more motivated? Nobody is playing for a draft spot. You're never going to hear a coach or a player say that they're playing to lose. But there are some benefits to losing this game versus winning it. And then what are the pros of actually winning it? I don't know. Both of these teams just don't have a whole lot on paper to play for outside of pride. But you mentioned the momentum that these teams have started in various ways over the last couple of weeks. And I mean, I just don't know that the Jets have any reason to sustain any of that momentum when that's likely not going to be your core next year. We'll see. That's my plus factor. Is who's more motivated to win?
I mean, and that's fair. I think the Jets honestly have more at stake to win this football game because you mentioned, okay, some of the core might be gone, but I think there's a good amount of this roster that's still going to be here next year. Unless Rodgers isn't here, unless Woody Johnson is like, okay, Rodgers, we're done with this experiment, then they're blowing it all up. But if they're not, going into next year with a little bit of momentum and a little bit of faith in yourself, I think could go a long way for the Jets. And on the Jag side of things, boy, they entered last week holding the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Now they're sitting at number 5. So the win was worth it. Travis Etienne is my plus factor here for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it's because both these guys are fully healthy. Both him and Tank Bigsby. We were talking about Tank Bigsby. Tank is 18 carries compared to Travis Etienne's 4. Man, all right. I wonder if the pendulum's just going to swing in the opposite direction because Doug Peterson didn't exactly give a a concrete reason why that was the case. He was just like, no, I mean, that's how it shaped out. Well, 18-4, I think it's a little bit unintentional, but I wonder if they just go back the other way with these guys both being fully healthy. And so how much Travis Etienne plays. And then, this guy was a back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher for them in his first 2 seasons. And so even though he's dealt with some injury this year, he's fully healthy now. And I wonder if he's going to be in for maybe the biggest workload of his season this year. So he's going to be my plus factor. Washington Commanders traveling to New Orleans to face the Voodoo and the New Orleans Saints here. Although, wild things have happened for New Orleans. Even more wild things are going to happen here because, one, you don't even have Taysom Hill to lean on because Taysom Hill is now out for the season. Derek Carr is not playing in this game. So is Jake Haener? Is it Spencer Rattler? It's going to be the backup quarterback effect that you don't have a lot of tape on, certainly if it's Haener. What do we think about this one? Matchup that matters. Where are we going?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts also with limiting the Commanders' offense and Scary Terry against, I guess, so it's Scary Terry versus Alontae Taylor. I'm assuming that's going to be the matchup that we're going to see here. Scary Terry, top 10 wide receiver as far as receiving yards and most major receiving metrics. He's been absolutely phenomenal with Jayden Daniels. And though Jayden Daniels, I feel like, has ebbed and flowed a little bit over the last few weeks, gone up and down, it's to be expected from a rookie, but Terry McLaurin has been quarterback proof for his entire career at this point and been able to be productive regardless of who's throwing him the football or how that person is performing at this point. But I do think that, that has the potential to run up the score a little bit. We know the Commanders are capable of scoring points. So if you have any chance of keeping pace with them, if you're the New Orleans Saints, you have to limit that. And how that particular matchup is going to go, I think, is going to determine how productive the Commanders are.
Commanders run game versus the Saints run defense. I think when the Commanders are at their best, they're running the football well. You mentioned Scary Terry and how great of a compliment he has been in the passing game, but I really do think this is a run the football type of a team first. And with that being the case, the Saints have not been a great run defense team. 56.4 run defense grade for the New Orleans Saints over the last month. That is 25th in the NFL. It's just a unit that, especially on the interior defensive line, they have really struggled. I feel like the edge play has gotten a little bit better, but man, on the interior defensive line, they're hurting. And this is Commanders offensive line that played really well, I think, through the first, let's say, 6-7 weeks of the season, cooled down a little bit in the middle parts of the year, but could really get back to form here for Washington as they make their playoff push and they get ready for the playoffs here. So at least certainly they hope. I think that starts running the football and how well they're able to dictate the game on the ground is going to be what I'm looking for here, especially with it being, in New Orleans. You don't want that offense out there. You want to control the ball as much as possible. And even with the backup quarterback out there, you want to make sure the ball's in your hands more than it is theirs because, again, crazy things happen when you play games in New Orleans. It's just what we have seen this season. My plus factor on top of that, just to roll it all into one, has to be Jake Haener. Jake was able to come in last week when Derek Carr goes down. So I feel like that's a little bit of a hint of Haener being the starting quarterback here in this game. He had a 70.7 passing grade against the Chargers in week 8. You can see some of the passing stats there from that game. He's still a relatively unknown. I mean, I loved watching his tape when he was at Fresno State. That was a ton of fun. And so I think that he's a gamer. I think he's going to be ready for it. He's a really competitive player, but so is Spencer Rattler. And so I just don't know what this offense is really going to look like because we have not seen either of them as of late. So that's the total plus factor here is, can you get something out of your quarterback position with all the injuries that the Saints have to a lot of their passing weapons as well? Can whoever starts a quarterback really be able to give you something to complement whatever you're going to get in the run game and however the offensive line can play in front of you? So I think the Commanders and their style of play, how they would like to play this game, it might not be a super high scoring game. So again, if you get some good quarterback play out of whoever is starting, could keep pace here. So how Haener plays, that's the plus factor to me. What about you? What do you got?
Is the Jake Haener agenda the wired agenda? Like Spencer Rattler is now the tired agenda, and then Jake Haener is now the wired agenda.
I didn't think we were there with Spencer Rattler. Yeah, I feel like I'd rather now. I like Haener. So either one of these guys that's going to start, I'm going to pay attention to it. But I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't Rattler that went out there. But maybe it is.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, there was that subsection of Saints Twitter that was all about Spencer Rattler for a really long time, and now I don't know. Has it switched to Jake Haener? Who knows? But a guy that does get a lot of first downs, at least for this New Orleans Saints offense, is obviously Alvin Kamara. 52 first down rushes. That ranks tied for 6th in the league, actually, with Chuba Hubbard up in Carolina. But 41 missed tackles forced on runs. He's got 26 explosive runs. This is the guy that you need to lean on for your offense, especially when you have such a big question mark at quarterback. I think that that's exactly what the Saints are going to try to do, because that's what they always try to do. Alvin Kamara has been that guy for them for so long. And we saw flashes of it, especially this year, where there were sustained stretches of games where Alvin Kamara really looked like the Alvin Kamara of 2-3 years ago. And you're going to need that when you don't really know what's happening at quarterback. Now that's very true.
Baltimore Ravens traveling to New York to take on the New York Giants here for our next game, 1 p.m. slate. What do you got as your matchup that matters here for this one?
I'm going to take the obvious one, and it's Derrick Henry against the New York Giants run defense here. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like that's going to be what matters most in this game. 8th most tackles for loss or no gain by the, I just totally lost myself, Derrick Henry.
Yes.
8th fewest, tackles for loss or no gain. So obviously that's someone that is going to push forward. 8th most missed tackles versus the run. 17th in EPA per play allowed from the New York Giants run defense. So like, they're not bad, but they're not great either. And you're facing a great running back, which, I mean, you could go through all of the stats on Derrick Henry, but the biggest thing is he's just really hard to bring down. And when you have a team that can do so many different things with not only its running back, but its quarterback as a runner, that is going to stress any defense, no matter how good you are against the run. And like I said, the Giants have been very kind of average this year. Henry, 5th most missed tackles forced. I don't know if I said that before. Anyway, we can go through all of the stats, but you just know that he's the guy that you have to stop if you want to stop this Baltimore Ravens offense. And I don't know that I trust the Giants to do it.
I would love to have my matchup that matters be the Ravens in deep coverage this season, and how the Giants can attack it. But I just don't think they're good enough to do that. Like, the Ravens were almost dead last in the NFL when it came to defending throws of 15 yards or more. They're not quite dead last. They're in the 20s. It's still a 30.1 PFF passing grade, but I don't trust Drew Lock, especially of the inefficiencies that I saw last week, to be able to even attack a weakened Ravens secondary in that regard. So instead, I went to the Giants offensive line versus the Ravens defensive line, because if the Giants are going to have success at all whatsoever, it's going to have to be on the ground. And they have run the ball poorly. I thought that Tyrone Tracy was in for a big day, and the Giants offensive line, 91.8 run blocking grade last week, and it just did not give us really anything in terms of Tyrone Tracy production. And so I would like to see more of that. And it's a Ravens defensive line that is good, but I think certainly if the Giants play the way that they did last week and the Giants offensive line played well, you could take advantage of that. And I don't think the Giants are going to win this football game. I don't know if people are going to be really disappointed in me saying that, but if they're going to keep it close, the offensive line is going to have to play as well as they played last week. And just, big picture stuff, the offensive line continuing to play really well will mean a lot towards a lot of their free agents and their offensive line decisions and their draft decisions that they have for this upcoming offense, or this offseason, excuse me. So how the Giants offensive line plays, if they can string together a couple of good games here down the stretch, I think that's going to be really important. My plus factor is Derrick Henry. I mean, you mentioned just because he has to be. If the Ravens are in a situation where they know the Giants aren't going to score a lot of points, unless Drew Lock just comes out of nowhere, just goes full Missouri on us, unless something crazy happens, I think it's just going to be a heavy Derrick Henry game. And they're going to be very content handing the ball off to him, saying, you better tackle this guy a lot more than you have other backs throughout the rest of this season, or we're just basically going to march down the field every time. And even if we only score 21, 24 points, we know it's going to be enough to beat you. So slowing down Derrick Henry, not stopping Derrick Henry, because nobody really does that, but slowing down Derrick Henry, sort of like you said with your matchup that matters, to me is the ultimate plus factor here. What about you? Who's your plus factor?
Yeah, well, going back to what you were talking about with Tyrone Tracy, I also think that he could be a plus factor in this, because we didn't see it work out this last time, despite the fact that the Giants are good when it comes to run blocking. But Tyrone Tracy has the 6th lowest stuff rate of any qualified running back at 14.1%. So he doesn't get stopped. he kind of gains minimal yards or has been gaining. He hasn't really gotten, the breaks and we haven't seen the vision out of him as far as, some of these extended runs, explosive runs, anything like that. But he doesn't get stopped. So to me, I feel like that just means that maybe it's still coming. Like Tyrone Tracy, the game that you want him to have, again, if you can't really rely on what your quarterback is going to do, maybe that could still happen. There's little stats and little things, little hints that could still happen for him. And again, if you're not getting stuffed at the line, a lot of that has to do with the offensive line and how good they are in run blocking, but you have to think that that's going to spring him at some point.
I would love to see it.
Yeah, maybe that's just me wanting to see it. I don't know.
I called him as a plus factor last week,
Yeah,
and they blocked well for him, and we didn't see it. It's got to be coming. It's got to be coming. He's too talented. Got to be able to see it. I love Tyrone Tracy, so I think it's a great call out. Great call out, Carmen. It feeds my agenda, so it's a really great call.
I was going to say it because it feeds your
Bengals Titans is the last game that we have in the 1 p.m. slate because we got a handful in the 4 p.m. slate, which I'm actually excited about. I don't know why the NFL goes like, oh yeah, we had 11 games. Let's put 8 at 1 o'clock and then 3 in the afternoon. Why don't you split it up a little bit more evenly for us there, Raj? But whatever. We got a little bit more of an even split here this week. Bengals Titans, matchup that matters. What are we doing? Titans coming off a terrible loss.
I was going to say,
Bengals
where are you going
off
with that?
Of a thrilling, near walk-off Monday Night Football win. What do we think's happening in this one?
Yeah, it's whoever is put on Jamar Chase. Because
damn it, that's mine too. Literally word for word. It's weird.
Mine's think alike, Trev.
Mine is word for word. Whoever is guarding Jamar Chase. That is literally what I put in my notes.
Whoever they put on Jamar Chase. Not that it really ends up mattering because he leads the league in receiving first downs among wide receivers with a minimum of 100 with 100 snaps. He's got 58 of those, by the way. He's got 15 touchdowns, which leads the league as well. Second in receiving yards after contact with 270, which is also just infuriating if you're trying to cover Jamar Chase, because not only is he going to get the football because Joe Burrow and him are just on a different wavelength, but he's also going to be able to get some more yards on you. Second in explosive receptions behind Justin Jefferson with 28. And you see it all there, 1,319 receiving yards, 626 yards after the catch, 15 receiving touchdowns. Again, league leading numbers here for Jamar Chase, which makes this all the more infuriating that the Bengals really don't have much to be playing for at this point. It took me until like 2 weeks ago, Trev, to give up on this team just because I didn't want to.
They're not going to make the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs.
No, they're not. But they're so much fun to watch. There's so much incredible potential there on that offense, and
it's so hard to watch this team and give up on them because the superstars they have on the team are unreal. Like Trey Hendrickson's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Jamar Chase is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then they also have some days Chase Brown's playing really well. Some days T. Higgins is playing really well too. But outside of those players that I just named, what do they have? I'm not even talking about depth players. I'm talking about players that have to start.
Right.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
You almost think that that should be enough though. What they have,
right? The Bengals,
even if you don't have dudes everywhere else,
the Bengals have the biggest talent gap between superstars and then the other players on their team, even their starters. They have the biggest gap of any team in the NFL. Now, even though this is a Brian Callahan revenge game, I don't know. I don't really think the Titans are going to do anything in this one. Chidobe Awuzie is the best candidate to guard Jamar Chase as best he can. He was able to come back from a groin injury where he missed a lot of time this year due to that groin injury. Came back last week, played well, pretty solid coverage grade, 74.6. But Roger McCreary, Jarvis Brownlee, Baker as well. I mean, these are guys who I don't think have a chance to cover Jamar Chase one-on-one. And so any opportunity where that's the case, I'm just giving the advantage to the Cincinnati Bengals. My plus factor in this one, though, going back to one of the dominant players that I was talking about for the Bengals, J.C. Latham's got to be the plus factor here at left tackle, in my opinion, because Trey Hendrickson almost exclusively rushes from the right side of the defense. So going up against the left tackles. And Trey Hendrickson wins in a variety of ways. I'm not just going to say he's a one-trick pony. He's not, but he's a powerful, more big-bodied edge rusher. So normally he can overwhelm a lot of these offensive tackles with, okay, he plays with enough speed to where he can really attack the half man. He can really go after one shoulder or the other and then just kind of outpower them when he gets to that point. Latham's a big ass dude. And so even though he's a rookie, he's a lot of mass to be moving. And so him at the left tackle spot is going to be very interesting because although he hasn't been great this season, he hasn't been terrible either. I think it's been a solid rookie season for J.C. Latham, but what a test this weekend going up against Trey Hendrickson almost exclusively. Right. So to me, if he could silence Trey Hendrickson, surprisingly doing so, all of a sudden I think that this gets a little bit more of a, all right, you got a chance for it to be a shootout, especially if Will Levis opens it up a little bit here. So who's your plus factor in this game?
I'm going back to the offensive side for Cincy because I do think that their best games and the games where they do come out, on top and actually win a game is when you get more from this rushing attack and Chase Brown in particular. So I have Chase Brown as my plus factor also because that's the place, I guess, where I trust Tennessee the most as far as their defense goes is against the run because they rank 24th in sacks. They have 26 on the year. They haven't been able to get pressure really up front. Their pass rush has left a lot to be desired. But against the run, they rank 12th in EPA per play allowed. So that's something where if you can limit Chase Brown, if you can limit this Bengals offense, again, I'm not saying you're going to completely stop them because Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and after Joe Burrow was campaigning for T. Higgins to stick around too, I feel like he's going to try to be feeding T. Higgins too. But I mean, the way that you balance out this Bengals offense is with the run game and with Chase Brown. And we saw him have a really good game last week. And I do think that that's when the Bengals are at their best. So can you limit that if you're Tennessee? And I do think that they might be able to, given that that is one of the strengths of their defense.
I love Chase Brown.
No, I like him too. That's the thing is I just like Chase Brown.
I think he's a stud. He's a stud. By the way, I have a personal / it's not a personal connection to Chase Brown. I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the show. So Chase Brown and his brother, obviously from Canada, but then they played high school football at St. Stephen's Episcopal High School in Bradenton, Florida, which is where I am from.
Yes.
And St. Stephen's Episcopal High School is the rival school to where I went to high school. So when I found this out, I was like, that's crazy. And I looked it up, and sure enough, as you would expect for a future NFL player, basically rushed for like 225 yards in the 2 games that he played against my high school.
Yes. Yeah, obviously. So, I'm surprised that he didn't go to IMG then. I was totally expecting you to say IMG. Because I'm like, coming from Canada, that makes sense. Like, it's like a boarding school for athletes.
No, he wanted to torture me personally, I think.
Clearly.
Is obviously why, him and his brother chose St. Stephen's. So shout out to them for just absolutely ravaging my high school on the football field. Shout out to Chase Brown for that. New Year's resolution. It's the time for, all sorts of great change. But instead of something that you might forget about in a couple of weeks, like often happens with New Year's resolutions, how about resolving investing in your kids' financial future? Boom. Beautiful. With a kids' investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life, your investments will keep growing long after the New Year's resolutions fade, giving your kids a solid start towards their financial future right now. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. It's all online. Setting an account, it's as easy as it takes 5 minutes to do. It's super simple. You can just manage your child's account and monitor all the investments right from your phone after you start it. While kids, they can't invest while they are minors, but this account allows these investments to grow on their behalf, gives it more time to grow, and they can use it for all sorts of stuff. Obviously, when they're still kids, tuition, tutors, music classes, things like that, summer camps, whatever. And then when they're young adults, a new car, a new house, starting a business, anything they need. It's just it's a really great thing for them to be able to have. It's a great thing for you to start. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services are provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investment is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. Patriots at Cardinals. This one could get wild.
Mm.
I would kind of, with this one being in Arizona,
Yeah.
I feel as though Arizona could run away with this one because Arizona is just a very hot and cold team. I'll get to that in a second. If this one was in New England, I think if I was betting on this game, I'd be like, stay far away. Stay extremely far
Yeah.
away from this
No,
game.
you're right.
I have no idea what's about to happen if this was in New England. I feel like it's going to be a little bit more pro Cardinals because it is in Arizona. But what do you think is going to happen? What's your matchup that matters here?
Yeah. I mean, I want to see one of those just like games that you talk about for the rest of his career out of Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know if it comes. I
Ooh.
don't know if it comes this week, but I think we're still waiting to see like that game that really solidifies him as the guy we all thought he was, as the one that should have been taken, that should have been taken first out of the receiver core. I think that there wasn't a lot of back and forth about who you took first in that receiver class. And of course, it was Marvin Harrison Jr., but you look around the league, you look at what Malik Neighbors has been able to do. It just, I don't know. I'm waiting to see that game out of Marvin Harrison Jr. because he does lead all rookie wide receivers with 7 touchdowns this year, but he ranks 27th in receiving grade among qualified wide receivers. He ranks 17th in explosive catches. 34th in yards per reception, 14.3. And I mean, I think it's going to be interesting, especially if they put Christian Gonzalez on him. You got two young guys going against each other. That's going to be fun. But like, I really want to see this game, a game where Marvin Harrison Jr. just takes over and shuts up all of the doubters.
I'm looking at it right now. He's got 2 games this year. Because I do agree with you. When I think of Malik Neighbors, I feel like he had a game earlier this year where he was just like an unbelievable breakout player. I feel like Roman Dunzes has one as well.
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't want to slight him too much. He has had 2 games where he has had an elite receiving grade. And I know you weren't slighting him. I'm just making sure. He has both those games. He had over 100 yards receiving. The game against the Dolphins in Week 8 was the one where he had 8 targets, 7 catches, $122, and he had a receiving touchdown. So like that one, I definitely think is a standout one. The one against the Rams, he had the 2 touchdowns, which obviously pumps up the receiving grade. But you're right. I would love to see one from him, and it'd be great to do it against Christian Gonzalez, who is my plus factor in this one because he is playing so well. 83.9 coverage grade for Christian Gonzalez over the last month. He has not had a coverage grade below 70 in the last 4 games. So it hasn't been, a lot of times when you look at corner, sometimes, okay, well, this game he had an interception or a lot of forced incompletions. So it's a really high grade. And then naturally just the cornerback position, you got some stinkers in there a little bit lower. That's not what's happening with Christian Gonzalez. He has been steady. He has been solid. He has been fantastic for this team. He had an interception in week 13 as well before they had their bye week. So I mean, my plus factor going up against that matchup that matters sort of with him and Marvin Harrison Jr., that's going to be the fireworks part of this. I think those 2 skilled position players going at it, no doubt about it. I mean, not that I want to see a bad game out of Christian Gonzalez, but like it would mean a lot if Marvin Harrison Jr. is able to play well against Christian Gonzalez. That is for sure. Matchup that matters to me, and I've sort of had some fun with this, talking about this for certain quarterbacks throughout the year, and Kyler has even been one of them, but it is Kyler Murray versus himself. And I mean that now more than ever, because a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that Kyler had as many multi-big time throw games as he did multi-turnover worthy play games. That has now shifted in the opposite direction of what you have wanted to, because I said that about him 2 weeks ago. And over the last 2 weeks, he has had multiple turnover worthy play games. In fact, his 5.1 turnover worthy play percentage now only trails Kirk Cousins and Aiden O'Connell since week 11. So obviously it's not the whole season. We're talking about just the last month, this last sample size that we have here. Kirk Cousins is the only one who has a higher one. And Aiden O'Connell, he's been in and out of the lineup, so he hasn't had as many throws to him. But 7 turnover-worthy plays overall. I mean, he's all over the place. Kyler's too talented to be doing this. But unfortunately, this is how I have viewed Kyler basically throughout his entire career. That MVP season, it was so many big-time throws and so little turnover-worthy plays. I really thought he had turned the page. Then obviously he has the ACL injury, misses a bunch of time. Last year he's coming back. He's reacclimating himself. There were a couple of games this season where we saw him be that MVP caliber type of quarterback with the big-time throws and limiting the turnover-worthy plays. But it has just been more of a roller coaster than I wish it would have been this year. And I think it just goes right alongside with the fact that the Cardinals are going in the right direction, but not quite there yet. And I don't think Kyler's quite there yet either. So what we get out of him in this game, again, it's at home. it's against a team that you should be able to beat. That's really what I'm looking forward to seeing. Let's get that another multi-big time throw game. Let's limit the turnover-worthy plays here. That's what I want to see here, more big picture, I think, for the Arizona Cardinals. What's your plus factor here for this one?
My plus factor is the other quarterback. It's Drake May, because he's been playing some really good football over the last few games. He's got 2 of his last 3 games. He's had over a 95 quarterback rating. And last week, 96.9 rating, added 59 rushing yards too to his 238-yard passing total. So he can scoot. And I feel like that's something that we keep forgetting about Drake May. Is I don't know, it's because I guess he kind of has the presence of a pocket passer, and he looks like, the quarterback that was made in the lab to sit in the pocket and throw the ball, and he's got a crazy arm, and it's great. But this man can move, and we're not giving enough credence to his athleticism. I feel like I keep saying that over and over again this season. And he's showing us, hey, listen, don't forget about me, because I can scramble around. I can get myself some first downs too that way.
Or forget about me. He wants.
Yeah, or forget about me. Right. No, exactly. Like he wants us to forget. I'm not going to forget that Drake May has wheels. And he ranks second among rookies with a 67.2 completion percentage, with a minimum of 10 attempts. So that's something too, where he's just blossomed for this Patriots team. And I don't think there's any doubt that they made the right call in drafting him and putting him in, despite the fact that this offensive line has not done him any favors. I was one of those people that was very, very concerned about putting him in with the state of this offense in New England. And he's done well anyway. I do think that the Cardinals are going to probably run away with this, given it's home and how much the Patriots have to travel, and just in general, the Cardinals are the better team despite how hot and cold they've been. But I really do think that, the Drake May is still capable of doing some really good things. And I think what it is, Travis, I just really enjoy watching him play football. I really do.
This game could be a fireworks show. I mean, there is the opportunity for it to be, with both of these quarterbacks being the way that they are, the dual threat nature that they both have, the big arms. There's no doubt about it. I mean, this game, I'm looking at it now, the over-under started at a 44. Now it's moved up to a 46. It's one of the higher over-under totals for any of the games this week. And yeah, I believe that. And I think that Vegas is sort of looking at this game, and they're seeing that there's a potential that this scoreboard could kind of get out of control here. And so that's a game that I'd feel good about betting the over for, just because of what these two quarterbacks are capable of. And with the Patriots coming off the bye and the Cardinals coming off some disappointing games and really wanting to get back on track, and it's at home. And I think we're going to see them play really focused and want to light up the scoreboard as well. So I think this could be a fun back and forth game if Drake May can really unleash and keep pace with Kyler and what that Cardinals offense is going to do. Bills Lions could be a Super Bowl preview here on a Sunday afternoon, which anytime you get one of these, you absolutely love it. There are so many different matchups with two of the best, most complete teams in the NFL. So Carmen, where are you going for your matchup that matters here with this game?
Yeah, like you said, it was actually pretty hard to just narrow this down. But I look towards, all right, where are the Lions hurting literally the most? That's along their defensive front. Although it does look like there was some stuff that came out today, Wednesday, about it looks like they're going to have Aleem McNeil, Josh Paschal, some of those guys along the defensive line. DJ Reader is still the biggest question mark of the 4 guys that are hurt. So they don't know if he's going to be able to go this weekend, but it sounds like they're going to get some more guys back, or, be okay for this game against the Bills. And that matters an incredible amount, because when you can get pressure on Josh Allen, things do not go well for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills offense. He has a 39% completion rate under pressure. He's got a 51.5 passing grade when under pressure. That ranks 43rd among qualified quarterbacks. And yet, I just said all of that about how bad it goes for Josh Allen when he's pressured. Wouldn't you know, he's got the second highest big-time throw percentage under pressure.
Of course he does.
11% of his throws are big-time throws, despite the fact he's got one of the worst receiving curve with worst passing grades under pressure. He's 4th in turnover-worthy plays under pressure, with 9 of them this season. You hear the expression, there are 2 wolves inside one? No, there's just one wolf in Josh Allen, and he does not care whether or not he's pressured, whether or not that things are going well for him. He's still going to chuck the ball down the field. And you can take advantage of that if you're the Detroit Lions, but you need to get that pressure first in order to bring out the most erratic version of Josh Allen, which I think is the best course of action when you're trying to go against the Buffalo Bills right now.
And I think that you put it beautifully right there, where this is the most erratic form of Josh Allen, but it's you don't have many opportunities to really rattle this Buffalo Bills offense or just team at all whatsoever. And so basically the best you're going to get is this coin flip odds where you go, okay, he's either going to complete a big time throw on us or he's going to give us a turnover worthy play. That's basically the best odds that you were going to get. So even though that's not really anything to like scoff at or say like, oh, it's a guarantee if you pressure Josh Allen, he's bad under pressure. Very clearly, you didn't say that he was bad under pressure. You just say that there's a little bit more of a coin flip than necessarily sitting back and letting the Bills offense come to you under their terms. So that is a very, very interesting point there. Obviously, this game is in Detroit. If this one was in Buffalo, I think maybe there's a little bit of an advantage there. I think home field matters a lot in this one. I'm going to flip to the other side of things for my matchup that matters. I'm going to talk about the Bills pass rush versus the Lions offensive line. Lions, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and they're going up against a Bills pass rush that, I'm going to be honest, not great over the last specifically like 3 or 4 weeks. Over the last 3 games, the Buffalo Bills just have a 60.0 team pass rushing grade, only 2 sacks, and just a 33% pass rush win percentage as a team. When people are thinking like, oh, well, like you talk about like Myles Garrett or Nick Bosa, and they have, 25% pass rush win percentage. That's unbelievable. So 33 must be fantastic. No, as a team, you really want to shoot for a number that's much higher. High 40s, low 50s, something like that. Like that's a really good pass rush for an NFL team. And so the fact that they're in the low 30s, it just has not been a great pass rush. Greg Rousseau was really on fire through the first half of the season. I still think he's a good football player, but Von Miller's come along 2 out of the last 4 games. He's, graded pretty well, had some pretty high pass rush win percentages, but how much can you really lean on Von Miller being that guy still? So if the Bills can't get pass rush the way that they haven't been able to generate pass rush over the last couple of weeks, I think that's cause for concern for them, not just in this game against the Lions, but also just moving forward in general as they march towards the playoffs and potentially getting the number 1 overall seed. So it's going to be a tough matchup because we know if you keep Jared Goff clean, I mean, he can really punish you. He can really be an assassin in this offense. And so a lack of pressure, I think pressure on both sides is going to be worth monitoring. What happens when the Lions pressure Josh Allen and what's the result? And if the Bills can even pressure Jared Goff at all, and if they can't, I think that he's just going to be able to move the ball too well on them. On the other side of things, I think we're in for a big Brian Branch game. Brian Branch has not had a overall grade in a single game above 60 since week 10. So it's been a handful of weeks here where he has struggled to generate a good PFF passing grade. Now, the Lions ask him to do a lot. He's a slot defender. He's a safety. He's an intimidator. He's an enforcer. He's a lot of things for them. But when you have a player like Josh Allen, who has the ability to be such a fantastic creator with his arm and with his legs, you have to have some sort of chess piece to counter it. I think Brian Branch is good enough to be that. I think he is good enough to be the downhill player when Josh Allen decides to take off and run, to come down and tackle him and limit those yards when he is scrambling. I think he is a great chess piece of a player to also give the defense the freedom to, when Josh Allen breaks the pocket, when he is in a scramble drill, where he is looking over the middle, cross body, cross the field, you allow Brian Branch to really keep his eyes on Josh Allen to make plays on the football and against receivers where other DBs might not have the ability or the vision or the IQ to be able to do it. Brian Branch is just such a damn good football player that who he is as a chess piece against Josh Allen, to me, is going to mean a lot in this game. And so with him kind of struggling over the last couple of weeks, not having a big impact game, let's see it from Brian Branch in this one. I think he's due.
Yeah. And I mean, he's had some issues as far as injuries go and all that kind of stuff. He gets banged up quite a bit or even ejected from games occasionally when it's against the Green Bay Packers. But He has I've noticed that he's just kind of stalled out a little bit over the last few weeks. I don't expect that to continue though, because Aaron Glenn does put a ton on him. I do think that the rest of the injuries to the defense have then kind of the domino effect of what that does and the more responsibility that puts on guys like Brian Branch or on the safeties in particular between him and Kirby Joseph. There are ways that like Aaron Glenn covers up some of the deficiencies or the holes due to injury in this defense. And it starts and ends with Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph in that safety spot, because that is the best part of their defense right now. But I'm going to go to the other defense too for my plus factor, and it's the Bills linebackers. You have Matt Milano back now, and they are going to be stressed against this offense that can beat you in so many different ways, just out of the offensive backfield too sometimes. I mean, you have Sonic and Knuckles, as they are so affectionately called in Detroit, in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And what's so incredible about this tandem of running backs is just how much they complement each other. You've got David Montgomery, who's an absolute bowling ball between the tackles. You've got Jahmyr Gibbs, who is like the finesse guy. He's got incredible vision. You get the ball to him in space and watch him just go 20, 30 yards down the field. And a lot of times that ends up falling as the responsibility of these linebackers. And Jahmyr Gibbs is extraordinarily fast, and he's really hard to keep up with. If you want to limit this Detroit offense, you're going to need to try to take some aspects away from it. And that's really, really hard to do when you have two different guys that are sometimes on the field at the same time, but they kind of switch off, but they also don't behave like you expect them to behave at all times. That opens things up for some more stuff underneath with Sam Laporta, for things down the field to Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams, who has been like their gadget, kind of stretch the field type of guy. You're getting stuff out of Tim Patrick, who, I think got a game ball this last game, or maybe it was 2 games ago. Anyway, you have so many different ways.
2 touchdowns, yeah.
Yes. So you get you just have so many ways that the Detroit Lions offense can beat you, plus the creativity of Ben Johnson to really exploit your weaknesses, or just be a petty king in the sense that he likes to take what you do well on offense and then prove that he can do it better, or his offense can do it better. He does it all the time. He just did it against Green Bay, where they were trotting out more 2 tight end sets than they ever have all season, which is something Matt LaFleur really loves to do. I keep saying, like, Ben Johnson keeps doing this week in and week out, where he is isolating something that you do well and then saying, I can do it better. But anyway, that falls a lot on the linebackers to really keep things going well, orchestrate, what you're supposed to be doing, make sure that your guys are really gap sound. It's just as much what they bring to the table, like guys like Matt Milano, from a physical standpoint, as it is what they bring from a mental standpoint. Matt Milano is one of the best as far as guys that can diagnose things, that can understand what these offenses are trying to do, how to get his guys in position, all that kind of stuff. He's a wonderful leader on that Buffalo Bills defense. He has to step up, and he has to be that guy against this offense.
Colts and Broncos, the next game that we're going to here. This is a very interesting game because it's in Denver. Both of these teams are coming off of bye weeks. So to me, my matchup that matters is the 2 head coaches. It's Sean Payton and Shane Steichen. You've now had a week to sort of think about things, and the Indianapolis Colts, the last game that they played was against the New England Patriots, and it was the thrilling, long drive for Anthony Richardson to get in the end zone and tie things up. Oh, wait, just kidding. They go for 2. They end up winning the game, stealing one in New England. It was a beautiful manifestation of the confidence that Shane Steichen has in his young quarterback, and great execution there. So a ton of momentum there from them. And then the last time we saw the Denver Broncos, it was that Monday Night Football game against the Cleveland Browns, where they won 41-32. Okay, well, now all of a sudden you've had 2 weeks now to get ready for this game. Does the running back rotation look the same? We had 2 100-yard receivers for the Denver Broncos there in that Monday Night Football game with Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims. What does that look like? How confident Bo Nix is playing? Like, this is, to me, this is a head coach matchup in this game. Extra time to prepare. That is the big time matchup that matters for this one, because the way that Shane Steichen was playing with Anthony Richardson before that bye week, I absolutely love that confidence that he was instilling in his young quarterback. And again, it manifested there in that final drive to win that game against the Patriots. And then it just feels like Bo Nix continues to get better and better and better under Sean Payton. We know the defense is playing well as well. this would be a huge game. This would be a huge game for the Colts to go in there and win. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. What a massive win this would be on the road for them, having a thrilling road victory against the Patriots, a bye week, and then being able to go into Denver and get up a win and get themselves a win as well would be huge. I don't know if they do it because of what a well-oiled machine it feels like the Denver Broncos are, but to me, this is a head coach matchup and two really good head coaches going head-to-head in this one. What's your matchup that matters here?
Well, that actually kind of feeds into my plus factor here, which is a little bit less quantifiable for just a singular player or a singular matchup, but it is the plus factor here is the odds. So it's the two coaches going up against each other, but it's the playoff odds. These teams are playing for their postseason right now. If Denver wins, their playoff chances go up to 89%. If they lose, it goes down to 48%. If Indianapolis wins, their playoff chances go up to 56%. If they lose, it goes down to 8%. So if the Indianapolis Colts lose this game, they can pretty much kiss their playoff chances goodbye. And that is something that is the biggest motivating factor when you're talking about these games that are already going to be weird. Their interconference games are going up to Mile High Stadium in Denver, and you have everything on the line and everything to play for right now. So we talk about how like Jets, Jags, we don't know who has what to play for. In this game, both these teams have so much at stake. So that's kind of my plus factor here is just the motivation that comes from knowing your season is on the line. And it's not hyperbolic to say that it lives and dies on this game, especially for the Indianapolis Colts. Not as much for the Denver Broncos, but that AFC playoff race, as much as we kind of think it's set, there's a lot of movement just kind of on the bubble teams versus the teams that are the lower seeds right now. There's still a lot of potential for movement there. So my plus factor is the odds.
Yeah, and somebody who they would love to have play the best that he has yet this season in 2024 is Jonathan Taylor. I think I brought him up as a plus factor for this team so many times because it just feels like an incredibly un-Jonathan Taylor-like season. He has not had a single rushing grade above 70 since week 3. Now, he's had 100-yard games here and there. Even against the Patriots, I think he had 96 rushing yards. You just go, okay, well, hold on, what gives? He is not forcing missed tackles in open space. His yards after contact is below 3 this season. And we're talking about playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And we see with Saquon Barkley, not only is Barkley playing behind a great offensive line, he is individually making that run game exponentially better. Right now, Jonathan Taylor is running behind a great offensive line, and he is not individually making that run game better. And you could see that with the low missed tackles forced per attempt, which is sort of an individual stat that we'd love to sort of cite to talk about how running backs are changing things just by themselves. And then yards after contact, right? When you get hit, are you bouncing off of it? Are you getting those extra yards after contact? And in years past, Jonathan Taylor has, and he is just not this season. So if the Colts are not only going to win this game in Denver, but make the playoffs and be a legitimate playoff team, Jonathan Taylor has to be better. I cannot imagine them going on the run that they need to make the postseason if he doesn't start playing the best version of ball that he has played here in 2024. So to me, he is a plus factor in this game, but also a bigger picture plus factor for this team because of how well it feels like Anthony Richardson has the passing game going. Now, I don't want to jinx him, and he has a terrible efficiency game, but we kind of know that's possible with Richardson anyways. Yeah. So that's all the more reason why you got to be able to have confidence in who you hand the ball off to in Jonathan Taylor. So to me, he's been my plus factor before, but he has to be for this game because we're running out of time this season for the Colts to really be able to rely on him.
Yeah, and there's another component to this Colts offense that I want to talk about too, and that's Alec Pierce, because he has this potential for these incredible, just down the field plays that you can see that Anthony Richardson has the arm for, but it's not always accurate. And that shows up in ways like Alec Pierce leads qualified wide receivers in yards per reception average at 21.9. His average depth of target by far leads the league, 22.6 yards down the field. But he only has 19 explosive catches. And the reason is because he's got only 14 catchable targets. So that's where you need Anthony Richardson to be able to find Alec Pierce and stretch this offense and make this offense a little bit more productive. Because, yeah, you're right. If you're going to round into a true playoff team, a contender in this conference, you're going to need to capitalize on things like that, whether it is on the ground or if it's through the air with a receiver that you are comfortable throwing to down the field. You just need to give him a better chance to actually come up with those plays and come up with more of those explosives that's going to move your offense down the field.
Bucs and Chargers. Next game that I want to get to here, and I'll go back-to-back sort of coaching matchups for my matchup that matters here. Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator, versus Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Chargers. The Bucs are traveling, obviously, all the way across the country to LA to take on the Chargers, so it's a big trip for them. But listen to this. The Buccaneers offense this season, second in the NFL in third down conversion percentage at 47%, fourth in red zone conversion percentage at 68%. Chargers, seventh in the NFL in third down defense, limiting offenses to just 37%, and first in red zone conversion defense, holding their opponents to just 41%. So this is a top 10, if not top 5 matchup for the money downs, as coaches call it. What do you do on third down and what do you do in the red zone? Liam Cohen has been fantastic this year. There's chemistry with Baker Mayfield, how they're clicking, where they want the ball to go. I think the offense is certainly evolving and how they have gotten the run game involved. The efficiency of how well the Bucs run the football this year compared to last year just cannot be overstated, just how much that means towards them playing some really, really good ball. Now, Bucky Irving, he played last game, but he was in and out of the lineup, didn't play too much. He's been dealing with a back and hip injury. We'll see how much he'll be able to go in this one, but Rachaad White was able to pick up the workload when he went out, and so he was able to have a great game. This offense can be really balanced in Tampa Bay, even without a guy like Chris Godwin, which is kind of crazy to say. But this defense in Los Angeles, they just put their players in such advantageous situations at all times. They don't rely on a lot of single coverage. It is truly a by committee type of approach of how they are going to defend you. And it is just two of the best coordinator minds in the game here in 2024 going head to head. And so how these coaches perform on the money downs of third down, and then when we get into the red zone, to me, that's definitely the matchup that matters. What do you got?
Yeah, my matchup that matters just goes back to something that I know that Tampa Bay is going to end up pushing, and I have to imagine the Chargers are going to be ready for it. That's Mike Evans, because I did the math again.
What's he at now? What do we need? What do we need?
He needs to average 102.5 yards per game the rest of the way to get to 1,000. That is something that he is acutely aware of. That's something that Baker Mayfield is acutely aware of. That's something that Liam Cohen is acutely aware of. They are going to hammer targets to Mike Evans as much as they possibly can. And we also know that Baker is not risk averse. He does not care. He has full faith in Mike Evans, and he wants to get him this stat. This is something that is important to the entire Tampa Bay Buccaneers team, fan base, everybody. So if I'm the Los Angeles Chargers, I am locking down Mike Evans as much as humanly possible in that secondary, whether that's bringing in safety help or doubling him with whoever. Like, I maybe even put Derwin James as a part of this, even if Mike lines up on the outside as much as he does. I fully expect Jesse Minter to have a plan for Mike Evans, because I do expect that to be a huge component of the Bucs offense, because they want to get him those stats specifically.
Man, I was gonna say that Quentin Johnston is kind of my plus factor here, and I do. I mean, like, Quentin Johnston needs to play well. With Ladd McConkey out, he had no drops last week. He had 7 targets, 5 catches. So Quentin Johnston actually had a pretty good game last week. But I wonder if the real plus factor is actually Tarheeb Still, their rookie cornerback.
The rookie corner, yeah.
You see some stats for Quentin Johnston there. They absolutely need him on that offensive side of the ball. They need him to play well even when Ladd McConkey is out there, right? We need this version of Quentin Johnston even when Ladd is out there. Come on, that's what they drafted him for in the first round. Well, they drafted him to be a lot more than that. But if he can at least be a compliment to Ladd McConkey, I think that definitely would help them out. But Tarheeb Still, their rookie cornerback, 78.6 overall coverage grade since week 10. He has been playing well. He's only allowed 13 catches. He's He's got 2 forced incompletions. He's got 2 interceptions himself. I mean, like he's playing really solid, and he has the body type to match up against Mike Evans. And so we're going to see a lot of one-on-ones there. So whether it's Quentin Johnson or Tarheeb Still, that's my plus factor here with this game. Who's your plus factor?
Well, I do think that maybe in order to zig when the Chargers are going to expect you to zag with Mike Evans, maybe it's one of those things where you still do lean on the run game if you're Tampa Bay's offense, and then you try for those shots down the field, and you try to get Mike these receptions of 30, 40 yards down the field, and that way you don't need to hammer him and pepper him with targets when he might not be open and risk putting the ball in harm's way. To do that, you look at the offensive backfield, and it is Bucky Irving. I don't know how healthy he's going to be. We're going to find out. It's a long trip to LA, like you said. The Bucs are not coming out a day in advance. They are coming out early on Saturday. But Bucky Irving, when he's healthy, and even when he's not as healthy, third most missed tackles forced per rushing attempt among qualified running backs this year. He's tied for the league lead in yards after contact per attempt. So yards after contact per attempt, that's on a per attempt basis, 4.1 yards after contact. That's incredible for especially a young guy. You talk about a bowling ball, you talk about a guy that's really hard to bring down. I think a lot of that then does depend on how actually healthy he is. But he is very motivated. This is such a fun run scheme to watch now, which is not something we've had in Tampa Bay for the last few years. And under Liam Cohen, it's blossomed. And you saw, I mean, even Rachaad White this last game, just running with violence. That's the only way that I can really describe it, is just the way that he was hitting the line of scrimmage and hitting his blocks and all that other, it was really, really good to see that he kind of was as fired up as we've seen Bucky Irving be, and why he's such a cult hero in Tampa Bay is just because of the style with which he runs, the violence with which he runs. Yep. That's something that's clearly rubbed off on Rachaad White too. Go Sun Devils. I also like to think that he was just fired up after the ASU won the Big 12. So, yes, there's that. He's playing for that. He's got to represent the maroon and gold well, Trev. And I do think that it comes down, the plus factor for the Bucs offense is their offensive backfield, and Bucky Irving in particular.
Yeah, look.
But I had to get that in with Rachaad White. I just had to. I'm
congratulations, by the way, on the Big 12 title and making the
a newfound sense of football superiority, which I've never had.
Who do they play? First round? Who do they play?
They have the bye.
Oh, right.
They have a bye. Not only did they win the Big 12, Trev, they've got one of the top 4 seeds in the college football playoff, and they are on a bye. You don't understand, Trev. I've never had anybody compliment me on my football team or congratulate me on my football team, my alma mater. That's never happened until now. And now everywhere I go, people are like, congratulations. And I'm like, for what? And they're like, Arizona State. And I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I get to be congratulated for that. My silly, lovable idiot sons. I love them so.
I'm very happy for you, and I can't wait to check in on whoever they're going to play, because that is a damn fun team to watch. So I am excited to watch them and whoever their opponent is going to be in the college football playoff. The Steelers-Eagles, very fun game that we have here. Two of the better teams in the NFL playing at a very, very high level. Since you just kind of talked about your plus factor there, I'll start with my matchup that matters. So it seems like there's been a little bit of airing of some dirty laundry here between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. Maybe they're not as good of friends as they once were or we once thought. A.J. Brown was very short and sweet. Short and sour, maybe that's sweet, and in what he thought wasn't going well with the team last week in a win, by the way. Right. What's wrong with the passing, or what's wrong with the offense? He just goes, passing. I was like, oh, okay, great. Yikes, that's tough. So obviously, this is one of the better teams in the NFL. The Eagles have one of the better records in the NFL. And for the longest time, I've been saying, this Eagles team, it's not the team of last year. They don't feel like this fraudulent, 10-2, whatever their record was last year when we started asking these questions. But I wonder if that's creeping back a little bit here with what we have seen so far this week. One of two things is going to happen here. Either A.J. Brown is going to continue to be frustrated and not really get the ball very much, or they're going to force feed the ever-living crap out of him, and they're going to be like, see, you're happy. We're giving you the football. Everything's great. They're going up against a matchup that at least should be pretty ripe for A.J. Brown to take advantage of. So my matchup that matters is A.J. Brown. My matchup that matters is not the relationship and friendship between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. It is actually A.J. Brown versus Joey Porter Jr., the Steelers corner, because what does A.J. Brown do really well? Catches the deep ball, right? He's one of the best in the NFL at doing so. On throws of 20 or more yards, Joey Porter Jr. is yielded just a 28.5 coverage grade this season. It's one of the worst of any starting corner in the NFL. He also has 4 penalties against him, which is really the big matchup here is, can Joey Porter cover A.J. Brown in a way where he is not yielding defensive holding and defensive pass interference? Because he just has not been able to do it so far this season, and this will be your toughest test. Outside of maybe going up against George Pickens in practice, because we know that he is also up there for one of the best deep ball receivers in the NFL. A.J. Brown's basically the best that he's going to face this season. He's already struggled to do so. It's only getting worse this week. Can he step up to the challenge against A.J. Brown? So that's my matchup that matters there. What about you?
It goes along with that because I do think that if the Eagles are smart for a lot of reasons, that's going to be kind of the concentration of this offensive attack against Pittsburgh, which you do see a little bit of an opportunity there with a young corner in Joey Porter Jr., who, like you said, is very penalty prone. Because if you look on the ground and what the Eagles have done so well on offense this season, namely Saquon, one of the many strengths of this Pittsburgh defense is their run defense. They have the 4th best run defense grade at 76. They have the 5th best EPA per play allowed, which is to say the 5th lowest, the 6th fewest missed tackles versus the run. So this is an incredibly sound team up front. And if anybody is going to limit Saquon, who, yes, is on an MVP tear, has all of the gaudy stats. You don't need to go through, any of Derrick Henry's stats. You don't need to go through Saquon's stats. They're essentially the same. In a lot of ways, that is to say they are top of the league in what they do and on the ground. But this is something that the Pittsburgh Steelers do really well, is contend with running backs. And we've seen the way that they can do that all season. So now, if you're smart, if you're Philadelphia, then I guess if you're getting shut down on the ground and you're trying to make A.J. Brown happy, you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone if you just take advantage of what A.J. Brown gives you down the field. And if Joey Porter Jr. So my matchup that matters is kind of the same as yours, but for different reasoning in that this is something that is a way to exploit a matchup for the Philadelphia Eagles. Whereas if you stick to the ground, if you stick to what you've been doing, you're going to run into a strength of this team.
When it comes to plus factors, I'll go to the other side of things. I'll take the rookie cornerback Quinyon Mitchell specifically against deep ball passes. And originally I wrote this note thinking that George Pickens could be out there. It kind of looks like there's, as Mike Tomlin said, an outside chance that George Pickens is going to be available for this game. So it doesn't look like he's going to play because they're going to need him healthy for a playoff run. But when you look at Quinyon Mitchell, 15 targets of throws of 20 or more yards this season, just 3 receptions allowed. Pretty incredible for a rookie. And even though George Pickens isn't going to be out there, the moon ball is the identity of what Russell Wilson wants to do in the passing game. And so somebody else is going to be running some of those routes. And Quinyon Mitchell, I feel like could have handled things even if George Pickens would have been out there. Now, who is it going to be on the other side of those long passes from Russell Wilson? Because, man, if they're not able to push the ball down the field at all, it's hard to see them outscoring the Philadelphia Eagles in this game. So I feel as though they're going to have to do that a little bit more than they did last week when they were without Pickens. And Quinyon's been fantastic at defending the deep ball. So he is my plus factor here because if he continues to be lights out when doing so, I don't know if the Steelers can keep up. What about you? What do you got?
Well, yeah, and then for that reason, because you don't know who's going to be available for you offensively, it's Najee Harris for the Steelers. And he's been quietly, I don't know if it's quietly. I don't know if it's like if people haven't really been paying attention to the way that I feel like Najee Harris has upticked his production over the last few weeks. He's got the 2nd most missed tackles forced among running backs behind only Josh Jacobs this season. So he's someone that is extraordinarily determined, and I really do feel like there's something to be said about keeping this offense multiple against an Eagles defense that is incredibly good in all 3 levels. You just talked about Quinyon Mitchell, but we didn't even talk about the defensive front in Philadelphia. But if you can get Najee Harris going and keep this offense, or keep the Philadelphia Eagles defense guessing, that's something that I think is going to help you if you're Pittsburgh. And it's not necessarily taking advantage of Russell Wilson's newfound or refound deep ball excellence and all that kind of stuff, but it at least keep you moving down the field and help you control the clock a little bit more, keep the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands and Saquon Barkley's and AJ Brown's and whoever else decides to get involved with the Philadelphia
I think
Eagles.
refound was the correct word there. Because it is. It's a resurgence of the Russell Wilson that we saw in Seattle just now with the Pittsburgh Steelers. On to prime time. Sunday Night Football. The Green Bay Packers taking on the Seattle Seahawks. This one out in Seattle. For my matchup that matters, I'll start with this one. I'm going to go with John Bullard in the slot versus Jackson Smith and Jigba. Jackson Smith and Jigba, an elite receiving grade in the slot for the Seattle Seahawks over the last 3 weeks, a 90.7 receiving grade. Now, over the last 3 weeks, Javon Bullard has lined up as the slot defender primarily for the Green Bay Packers. 58.8 coverage grade, 14 target, 12 receptions allowed, 155 receiving yards allowed. And so I like Bullard a lot, but he's sort of been struggling over the last couple of weeks, and this is a really, really tough task. I mean, JSN has been the most productive slot receiver in the NFL so far this season. So to me, if you cannot limit JSN more than even the rate in which Bullard has been doing so, if they're going to continue to rely on him as their primary slot defender, oh man, it's going to be a long day at the office, and you're going to need a lot of points to keep up with the Seattle Seahawks offense because they're going to be able to push the ball pretty well. So that to me is my big time matchup that matters. Slot defense versus elite slot play that we have seen from Seattle. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we've got both sides of this with a ton of young players going against each other. So you said, the Green Bay defense or Green Bay secondary against the Seattle's receiving core. You have on the other side, Green Bay Packers, a lot of young receivers against some really young and really fun secondary guys, or defensive backs, I should say, secondary guys. And honestly, the Seahawks, for as young as some of their guys are, they're top 10 in EPA per play allowed versus the pass. And they're really good coverage grade. I think 74 coverage grade when it comes to that unit. They're really fun to watch. I've talked about Devin Witherspoon, how much I love him, or Tariq Woolen, love him too. And then they're going to be going up against a lot of really good, solid young receivers for the Packers. I've talked about it week in and week out about why this is what makes the Packers so dangerous. You not only have a guy like Josh Jacobs, who is they're finding new ways to use him. The run scheme for Green Bay right now is it's so much fun to watch since the bye week, especially. They don't behave the same way week in and week out. And that's a testament to Matt LaFleur just changing things and using guys in the backfield differently, not just Josh Jacobs, but you see Jaden Reed get in on things, even Christian Watson at times. They're utilizing this really crazy run scheme so as to open things up for their guys down the field in Dontavian Wicks, in Romeo Dobbs, in who else have I said? I said Jaden Reed, I said Christian Watson, Bo Melton even sometimes. And then you've got, Tucker Kraft, who is such a really fun tight end to watch. So this entire Green Bay offense is really, really fun. It's really young. And Jordan Love is having a lot of fun with them right now. Ever since the bye week, I think we've seen a steady improvement, just, him being back in the lineup now and having the feel for his team. What's that going to look like against two guys that I really, really love in Seattle, Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon? It's going to be fireworks, man.
I am looking for Byron Murphy II, the Seahawks rookie, speaking of some of their young, exciting players, to have a breakout game in this one. Josh Myers, the center for the Green Bay Packers, struggled last week against the Detroit Lions, 13.2 pass blocking grade. It's not great.
That's not,
by the way, right? Not ideal. 3 pressures allowed, 61.9 pass blocking grade this season. So even if you take a step back, it hasn't been great. And when you look at Byron Murphy, 4 pressures, 16% pass rush win percentage last week, but that was the first time that he had a double-digit pass rush win percentage since week 7. So it really has not been a dominant season for Byron Murphy, but we know he has that ability. We've seen, Leonard Williams play very well on this defensive line, but I think that it's Byron Murphy's time to have another great performance. That we saw part of it last week for them, but I think that this week the matchup is ripe for him to be a takeover player, because as fast and as strong and as dominant as he can be, he can get in the backfield and really wreck some things for you. So everybody knows that the quickest, distance between, or the quickest distance at the quarterback's in a straight line if you're the defensive tackle. If you are a nose tackle, if you're a 3 technique, boom, you are right there in his lap. If you could beat your interior offensive lineman one-on-one quickly, that's almost a guaranteed recipe for a bad play for the offense and a good chance for it to be a sack as well. Byron Murphy hasn't quite been the player that we know he can be yet in that regard, but I think he's got a pretty good matchup this week to be a game wrecker and a plus factor. What do you got here?
Yeah, I've got the Packers D-line for pretty much the same reason, in that they haven't been able to get a lot of pressure at all this season. They ranked 27th in pass rush win percentage. They're bottom third in pressure rate. It's something that has been covered up by guys like Xavier McKinney, who have been able to generate takeaways, or the Packers team and defense in general has been able to generate takeaways. And that has kind of lessened the blow of just not being able to get any pressure up front. That's gotten marginally better since the bye week, about what was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago now? It's gotten marginally better, but you still need to, I need to see that become a factor then for the Green Bay Packers to be able to affect the opposing quarterback. We've seen Geno Smith be prone to some of these turnover-worthy plays, being baited into interceptions, all of that kind of stuff. That's great. But the way that you can help out this back end and kind of get past this little takeaway plateau that they've been on is to get pressure up front if you're the Green Bay Packers. And that's just something that's been lacking all season. And you hope that going forward, again, if you're going to be a viable team, not only this year in the playoffs, but going forward in this division, you're going to need to have a solid pass rush to fall back on. And I think a lot of this had to do with, switching to Jeff Hafley as the defensive coordinator. You switch schemes. And you were kind of trying to figure out where guys fit in and if their body types really filled in the roles that you needed them to play and all this other stuff. But now you've got to be getting beyond that. And we've seen it a little bit since the bye week. Just to continue that, I think is a huge, huge factor for this Green Bay Packers team, just not only in this game, but going forward.
Bears and Vikings, the first of 2 Monday Night Football in a doubleheader here this week. These teams faced off not long ago in week 12 when the Bears hosted the Minnesota Vikings. The final score was 30-27. This one obviously now in Minnesota here for Monday Night Football. Very curious, what's the matchup that matters here for round 2 of these teams, Carmen?
I think the matchup that matters that can spark a little bit of confidence for the Chicago Bears is, if you're going to boil it down to a singular matchup, it's Jalen Johnson versus Justin Jefferson.
Okay. That's it. It's tall task.
It's a tall task. Exactly.
If your matchup that matters depends on you limiting Justin Jefferson, it might be tough for him. It might be tough.
I know what we're asking here. It's something though that Jalen Johnson takes a lot of pride in. It's a matchup that he wants to be responsible for. He wants to be the tone setter. I think that it would be fair to say that when he lacks motivation, you can see it. He does not lack for motivation against Justin Jefferson. Now, that all being said, who has been able to limit Justin Jefferson? He leads the league in receiving yards despite being public enemy number 1. When any team goes in to play the Minnesota Vikings, who do coaches just say, all they say is just don't let 18 beat us. Do not let 18 beat us. I don't care if somebody else is going to beat us. Do not let 18 beat us. And guess what happens? 18 beats you anyway. It's because not only of it's a testament not only to the skill set of Justin Jefferson and how good he is physically and his abilities and his read on situations, his route running, all of the beautiful things that go along with being the best receiver in the league. But it also has to do with Kevin O'Connell and the way that he can scheme him open still. And yet, despite the fact there's a ton of attention on him, just the way that he layers his different route concepts and the way that he involves the other receivers in the game, if Justin Jefferson isn't open, then you're going to give up something to Jordan Addison on a route that's going to beat you just as bad as Justin Jefferson would have, or be as productive as that. It's poetry in motion for the Detroit or for the Minnesota offense, and it's not easy to shut down Justin Jefferson. So if Jalen Johnson can do that, though, that's going to go a long way just in the belief that this team has in itself. The Bears looked completely lethargic against the 49ers. They got down big early, and that completely changed the way that they were able to play the game. I think the offensively, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between how Thomas Brown has called his games versus, as a head coach versus an offensive coordinator. But I think the biggest difference in that game was that they were down so much that Caleb Williams was ignoring everything he had underneath, looking for the big play, trying to make up some ground. And that really got them away from everything they wanted to do offensively. And it really came it really was because of the defense. The defense had been one of the best red zone defenses up until this point in the season. And then I think the 49ers were 5 of 6 in the red zone that day. I mean, you can't let that happen. You have to play this team tough. They're going to, because it's a division game, and all of the Bears division games have been incredibly weird. They've lost all 3 of those games by a combined 7 points. That's how weird this all is in this division. But Justin Jefferson is still by far and away the scariest thing about this Minnesota Vikings team right now. Leads all wide receivers with 35 explosive catches. It's just, and he's got a guy named Sam Darnold who is playing football, like the best football of his career, and warranting like Kendrick Lamar hype videos to be put online. And it's totally deserved. He deserves to have the Kendrick Lamar hype videos
100%,
because like he has the highlight reel to back it up.
I said this on the review show on Monday. I don't know how you let Sam Darnold walk.
I know.
I don't care that you drafted JJ McCarthy. How do you let this quarterback walk away, especially depending on where the Vikings could very well make the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah.
How do you let that quarterback walk? I don't think you can. I don't think because it's not like he's twilight of his career either. Sam Darnold's 27.
I know.
You could sign Sam Darnold to now I don't think they're going to do this, but like you could sign him to a 7-year deal and then he's still only 33, 34 when it's done. We got quarterbacks in their mid-30s playing great ball right now. So anyway, it's
a different conversation, but I do think that that's, again, a testament to how much faith they have in Kevin O'Connell, because they're like, well, yeah, sure, he rehabbed Sam Darnold's career, but we can afford to let him go because we know that he's going to do really good things with JJ McCarthy, and that's the guy that we wanted, and not yada, yada, yada. But I hear you. I hear you. It's going to be a weird one.
I get worried for the Chicago Bears.
Woo!
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Sneeze. I get worried for the Chicago Bears if this game doesn't go well. Like, I don't even know. A close win might sting just as bad, like, depending on how close this happens. But, like, after this, they will have lost how many in a row now at that point?
8. Are they at 6 or 7? Yeah, they
will have lost 8 in a row if they lose this game.
Yeah.
And then they play the Detroit Lions, the Seattle Seahawks, and Green Bay Packers.
They have to go through the division all over again.
No, but I know, but I'm saying you might lose all motivation. I mean, your coaches are already fired. They're already gone. You've lost 8 in a row. I get really worried for Chicago if they lose this game, which they're playing one of the best teams in the NFL, so it's hard to see them. There's just got to be some sort of building block, or else, man, Detroit, Seattle, Green Bay, that's so rough. Anyways, just for this game in particular, though, the matchup that matters to me is how you're going to cover TJ Hockenson. A lot like you talked about, what are the Rams going to do against the 49ers to try to stop George Kittle. The last time these teams matched up in Week 12, TJ Hockenson, 9 targets, 7 catches, 114 yards. Now, Jordan Addison killed them too, and it was funny. Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson go off in that game. Justin Jefferson didn't have as good of a game, so even limiting Justin Jefferson does not produce the fruits that you want it to if you don't also cover TJ Hockenson, who could really wreck this game for you. And just so he was able to clearly a couple of weeks ago when they matched up, you've got to be able to cover him a lot better. So whether it's a safety, a linebacker, combination of the two, total defense, whatever, it's really hard to envision, especially off of a game where Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison were monsters last week. It feels like over the last 4 weeks, now I looked this up, the last 4 weeks, Hockenson, Addison, Jefferson, all of them receiving grades above 8. The passing game is diverse. It's so tough to defend, but you've just got to figure out a way to do it. And so if Hockenson has another monster game, again, it's hard for me to see Chicago keeping up. My plus factor in this one, I'll say Aaron Jones, because again, in Week 12, 108 rushing yards for Aaron Jones. And if you let him have that kind of success again, it's hard for me to see the Bears keep it up. What do you think? What's your plus factor?
Yeah, mine's actually another tight end. It's Cole Kmet. Because if you look at this Bears offense, last week against San Francisco, because I think they were down so much and Caleb was just not seeing anything underneath, Cole Kmet had 0 targets. It's not good. Cole Kmet has been such a wonderful safety blanket for for Caleb Williams. He's a guy that can get you the gritty first downs. Last time they played the Minnesota Vikings, he had 10 targets, 7 catches, 64 yards. And the Bears were able to take Minnesota Vikings to overtime. I don't think, like, not that that's a direct correlation, but this Bears offense is clicking a lot better when you're getting Cole Kmet involved. You also saw, I mean, he wasn't even involved in the blocking game either in that first half against San Francisco. And then you watch the second half and you saw that he's chipping more guys. He's on a couple more tight end wham plays coming across the formation, all that other stuff. So Thomas Brown remembered he existed from a blocking standpoint. And that's not to say that he wasn't being made available underneath. It's just that Caleb Williams was completely ignoring the short to intermediate area of the field for a large portion of that first half, especially trying to gain some ground on the San Francisco 49ers, but it didn't work. So this week, you can't get down, like I talked about before, in the very beginning, and then, or at least not so much that it's not, you can't come back from it. And then I really do think that you need to play this kind of short, quick, up-tempo even offense that leans on guys like Cole Kmet to move down the field, control the clock, sustain drives, all that kind of stuff. I mean, 5 of Caleb Williams' 7 sacks he took against San Francisco came on third down. That you can't do much when that happens. And Cole Kmet is a guy that can really get you those third downs, especially in those third and shorts. So just see him, Caleb. That's all I'm asking. Just see Cole Kmet.
Final game that we're talking about here, the Atlanta Falcons and the Las Vegas Raiders. This is a very interesting game because, look, I understand that even when seasons aren't going great, guys can still have a lot to play for. You know, the pride, the next contract, you know, just making sure that they're going out and doing their best. I fully understand that. But it's a very strange game because the Falcons have everything to play for, and the Raiders have nothing to play for, essentially. You know, I when I say the word nothing, I don't literally mean nothing, but you guys know what I mean big picture. If this game's in Atlanta, I think it could be a runaway. This game's in Las Vegas, and so I think it could be a little bit different here. Aiden O'Connell, it looked like, man, he's suffering a really tough lower body injury against the Buccaneers, but it looks like, okay, it wasn't as bad as we once thought it was. There's a chance that he might still play this week. Obviously, it's going to be a big deal if he's able to go because Desmond Ridder hasn't really showed us a lot. Although Desmond Ridder revenge game, I suppose.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
could have that if he ends up starting in this game. But Falcons have to win this football game. They're now a game back from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They own the tiebreaker, but they're not really going in the right direction over the last couple of weeks. I'm very curious your matchup that matters here for this second Monday Night Football doubleheader.
Yeah, well, given all of that, I'm like, all right, what could spoil the Atlanta Falcons' chances at winning this game? And it's Brock Bowers for the Las Vegas Raiders because he's just on an incredible tear. He leads all tight ends in receiving first downs with 46. And again, I mean, he's been able to do that through all of the uncertainty that Vegas has had under center. He's an irreplaceable part of this offense. And it's just, he's so much fun to watch. And he's a guy that's going to get you those tough first downs. He's a guy that's going to move you down the field. He's going to come up with some of those contested catches. He's so versatile in just his skill set and where you can line him up, whether that's attached, tight, or if that's out wide. We see him out there plenty of times. That's the one thing that I really think can spoil things for the Atlanta Falcons because I don't trust their defense against a tight end like Brock Bowers, especially.
I'll go on the other side. I don't know how much I trust the Raiders coverage at all, like
Fair.
Point blank. If you take out Trayvon Merrick last week, I mean, they were bad. Ja'Cameron Richardson, 43.7 grade. Jack Jones, 55.8. Darnay Holmes, 59.1. Isaiah Polamalu, 37.3. I mean, 30.6 coverage grade this season for the Raiders, just their secondary. That would be the worst since the Detroit Lions in 2020. So that would be the worst secondary grade for a single season that we have had in 4 years. That's how bad the Raiders secondary is right now. And Kirk Cousins, he's not playing great ball either. Leads the NFL in turnover-worthy plays in general. Leads the NFL in turnover-worthy plays when pressured. But he still has some big-time throws here and there. And this is, again, if the Falcons really have a chance at catching the Bucs and winning this division and being anything in the playoffs, they've certainly got to show it against a defense that has not been able to cover anybody really this season. So, to me, this is a more of a big picture game. When one team has everything to play for and the other one doesn't really have much to play for, the team that's got everything to play for better be able to take care of business. And specifically for the Falcons, we know they can run the football. We know they can run block well. We know they got good running backs. Can you pass when you need to? They should be able to this week against the Raiders. Who is your plus factor here?
It's Kirk Cousins. It has to be Kirk Cousins.
It's true. Yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be.
Over the last month, he has had the worst passing grade of any qualified passer. He's had the most turnover-worthy play percent, or the highest turnover-worthy play percentage, I should say. And with all of that, you expect, all right, if you have this many turnover-worthy plays, are you trying to at least chuck the ball down the field? That's not the case either. He's got the 6th lowest big-time throw percentage. He's just not productive. And it's only gotten worse over the last month. So can you get out of whatever slump this is and get back to at least average if you're Kirk Cousins? I mean, that's all we're really asking for here. You do have a ton of talent when you talk about Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London and all these guys. Like, you have the talent around you on this offense. You should be able to do more with it. I do have to wonder, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I looked this up about a week ago. Kirk Cousins is running play action at either the lowest rate in the league.
They don't have him do it. No.
They don't have him do it at all. And it's something that he did so much in Minnesota, in all of his stops before that. And it was something that he thrived in. And you just wonder, how in the world have you not identified this and said, all right, can we just uptick that? Like, I don't know. It's kind of baffling to me.
I wonder if it's a mobility thing. I really do.
And that's what you have to think of it, I guess.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's a big factor there. My plus factor in this one, I'll be nice to Falcons fans here. I'll give you your kudos here. Defensive line's actually playing pretty well recently, especially when you rope in the linebackers as well. How they have rushed the passer over the last couple of weeks has been important. In week 14, so this is last week, 75.5 pass rush grade. They had 4 sacks, 18 pressures, 54.3 pass rush win percentage. All of those numbers were the second best single game numbers that they have had as a team so far this season. They had the second
Falcons D-line.
What did you say?
I said, good job, Falcons D-line.
They're playing well. And here's the thing. Good for Raheem on recognizing how to improve that, because it was also the second most effective day that they have had on the blitz. They started blitzing a lot more within the box, less cornerback blitz, less blitzes from the slot, a lot of simulated pressures as well. So they're just getting more aggressive. They're realizing they can't win with just 4 up front. They're just continuing to get a little bit more aggressive, get a little bit more blitz heavy there. Guys like Arnold Ebiketie, Matthew Judon, Caden Ellis, they played very, very well last week. And so again, it's a decent offensive line with the Raiders. But the Falcons pass rush has been looking better as of late. Let's keep that momentum rolling. There we go. All 16 games previewed here for you guys in week 15 of the NFL schedule. I appreciate everybody watching and listening here on a Wednesday, getting it in here with us. For Carmen Vitali, I'm Trevor Sikkema, saying thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back with you same time to preview the games for week 16. Final stretch next week. We'll see you guys then. Enjoy the weekend.